Besant, the Treasury Secretary, suggested this was part of a big plan by Trump. I don't believe that. I mean, these tariffs were rolled out in a chaotic way. The formula that was used to determine the tariffs was a joke, right? Not based on any economic theory, particularly. And, you know, I think in the end, the markets were falling because there was a lack of credibility and confidence in US policy in the White House, right? And, you know, yesterday, I mean, we saw the US bond market start to crack. I mean, if that would have happened, that was quite extraordinary. So I think markets, in the end, forced Trump to concede on the tariff story. And I think, you know, they argued that China has not played a very clever hand. Actually, I'd say the opposite. I mean, the Chinese administration looking at this saw weakness in the Trump White House. It saw, again, as I said, a disastrous rollout of tariff policy, right? I mean, the US has isolated itself from its allies because of this and because of its security policy. And China will think that it has the advantage. All it has to do is play tough, don't concede anything, and Trump will basically roll over because Trump, through the market process, is very, very vulnerable.
And do you believe that China has more chances to win a trade war rather than the United States?
I do now, yes, because I think we've seen Trump's vulnerability, which is the markets. His vulnerability is the markets and his billionaire friends around him who don't like, you know, suffering big mark-to-market losses on their various portfolios and their investments, right? So, and also the Republican Party as well. I mean, we saw some divisions appearing there. And China seems to have rallied the country behind the leadership. There is a message from China that, you know, they survived COVID, they've built up defenses, they've built up buffers, they can ride out a trade war with the Americans, and that actually it's existential for them. I mean, look, I think what we've learned from Trump in the 100 days or so he's been in office is, again, he's a bit of a bully. He looks for weakness. And if you end up being the weaker partner, you are going to get exploited, right? Unfortunately, like the Ukraine energy deal, or minerals deal, I should say. So if I were the Chinese, I would make sure that I stayed tough. I bluffed Trump out, and I make sure that I don't end up looking weak, because if the Chinese lose this trade war, they're in a very difficult position, because I think Trump will continue to exploit them, or exploit that weakness.
What are the chances for a recession even after a reversal of many tariffs against countries?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's a high probability now, because for a number of reasons. Firstly, I mean, the whole textbook theory of trade is that, you know, trade liberalization, globalization lead to higher global growth, cheaper products, lower inflation. So you reverse that, means lower growth, higher inflation, it means stagflation. Aside from that, I think the uncertainty around tariffs, both on China and more broadly, will disrupt global supply chains. We'll see companies delaying decisions about exporting, waiting until there's more clarity. And I think we're already seeing that. There was a piece in the FT today that said a lot of Chinese companies are stalling deliveries to the US because they simply don't know what to charge, right? And so I think that disruption to supply chains that we saw that in COVID, I think it does disrupt economic activity, right? It creates uncertainty, leads to less consumption, less investment. It's a nightmare for the global economy.
Let's cover also the recent public debate between Elon Musk, Trump's favorite billionaire, and also Mr. Navarro, Trump's main envoy, and also his main part of the team on working on these tariffs. How can you assess this big rift between billionaires and Trump's officials?
Look, I think it goes to the heart of the issue in the White House about tariffs in China. I think the billionaires, the Musks, they've made a lot of money in China, right? I don't think theirs is an ideological, national security particularly related issue around China. They do, I guess, want to rebalance trade in the US's favor, boost the US economy, bring some jobs home, all those kind of things. I think the Navarro-style characters, they hate China with a vengeance, and they see this as this hegemonic battle for global supremacy between China and the US. And they think ultimately there's a war going to happen between China and the US, and tariffs are a massive tool to weaken and undermine China, right? So I think perhaps for the Navarro-style characters, it's a zero-sum game, right? It's about ensuring the US wins that game. I think maybe for the Musk guys and some of the billionaires, I mean, perhaps they can see a win-win scenario where ultimately global tariffs reduce, you have a freer global trade environment, and ultimately perhaps global growth is better. But I don't want to put words in their mouths. But so there's this battle within the administration, and we're not sure who's going to win out. But the problem is all this uncertainty about where tariffs are is terrible for global confidence. And again, that's going to be the factor ultimately that drives global growth weaker.
And also, how do you rebalance global trade in an appropriate way without using such high tariffs from your perspective? How should these things be done in an appropriate way?
Well, look, I mean, I guess there is some sense in having a fairer global trading regime. You could argue China has taken advantage of globalization, particularly by keeping its currency cheap over many years, accumulating a huge buffer of foreign exchange reserves. I mean, in effect, what the Chinese have done is kept an undervalued exchange rate, exploited Chinese consumers and the population by keeping their labor cheap through the exchange rate, and then making windfall profits from that through trade and current account surpluses and buying FX reserves to keep their currency weak and accumulating this huge foreign exchange buffer that they then use to buy influence globally. So I guess, allowing currency appreciation, less intervention by the Chinese in their exchange rate, allowing the currency to reflect its trade surpluses, I guess, is probably the best way. And then less non-tariff barriers, all those kind of things in the end are probably ultimately the best way to rebalance everything. But you're never going to rebalance perfectly, right? Because, it's not just about the merchandise trade position. It's about the services account. It's about the capital account. Some countries, it depends on their level of development. I mean, they may need to run, because they're importing capital, they need to, and they have a low savings rate, they may need to run large deficits on the trade and current accounts for a period of time. Comparative advantage. The global rules of comparative advantage. Some countries probably it's logical for to run merchandise trade surpluses, perhaps again counterbalanced by perhaps current less positive services and capital account positions. It's complicated, and I can tell you what is clear is the Trump administration is not going to rebalance merchandise trade positions by using crazy formulas that have no bearing on economics.
And also, let's cover Trump's most interesting statements throughout this day. He said that countries hit by his tariffs are calling up and kissing his ass. Don't you think that Donald Trump hates his allies? Does he hate European
Yes.
allies?
Well, he seems to do. I mean, he seems to hate Europeans, maybe not the British. He seems to have a fondness for the UK because of his family background, perhaps. I mean, I think the difficulty in this is, look, the way the Trump administration have framed the trade wars now is this is a fight with China, and allies can get preferential tariffs if they ally with the Americans against China. That's fine, but I think many of the US's traditional allies are, concerned about the direction of travel in the US now. They're not quite sure, given the Trump presidency, J.D. Vance's comments in Europe. They're not quite sure if they share the same values and interests. And I think they'd be quite reluctant now to put all their eggs in the American basket. I think from